What I'm about to tell you will probably keep you up at night. Yes, that's how serious this warning is. It will unsettle many people, anger most, and even drive some into denial. But after a career spanning decades at the very center of the global financial world, personally managing the flow of trillions of dollars in assets, and closely following every sector of the global economy, the time has finally come to clearly state one of the most painful truths I've learned. There are four major economic sectors. These sectors are not merely contracting, not simply seeing falling profit margins or losing momentum. These sectors are heading directly to zero. I don't mean zero growth. I don't mean zero profitability. I'm talking about the complete elimination of asset value in the truest sense of the word, a direct annihilation, an absolute erasure. This is not a scenario from the distant future, not a theoretical prediction or assumption, not an optimistic or pessimistic projection. It is happening right now, at this very moment, before your very eyes, and it is accelerating far faster than most people could imagine. Within the next 5 to 10 years, businesses in these four sectors will completely evaporate hundreds of billions of dollars in investor wealth. These businesses are already dead, they just haven't realized it yet. If your portfolio is exposed to any of these four sectors, I want you to understand this. Institutional money knows when to act. The big funds know when to start selling. The only question is when you will come to grasp it, and by that point, prices will have already settled at rock bottom. The most powerful players in the financial system have been quietly reducing their positions in these sectors for years. This is not a surprise. It is a plan, a deliberate repositioning. Institutional credit portfolios are being systematically restructured, risk exposures are being gradually minimized, and new financing doors are being quietly shut on these businesses. We're not doing this for a political agenda. We're not doing this because we dislike these sectors. We are doing this because of mathematical necessity, because the technological transformation is irreversible in its direction, because economic dynamics have crossed a threshold that can no longer be reversed. What I am about to share with you is not a forecast or a vision quote. It is the totality of capital allocation decisions shaped by analyses conducted on massive data sets, technology adoption curves, regulatory trends, consumer behavior patterns, and real-time data from millions of customers. When you are inside a structure serving more than 100 million customers and managing over $4 trillion in assets, you begin to see economic trends years before they are noticed by individual investors or even institutional players. The total current market capitalization of these four sectors exceeds $3 trillion. That is a figure higher than the GDP of most countries, and all of this wealth will evaporate as businesses operating in these sectors either go bankrupt or are acquired at prices far below their real value by the technologies rendering them obsolete. I will explain to you exactly what these four sectors are, why their destruction is inevitable and accelerating, and what you need to do to protect your wealth step by step. The first sector entering the process of extinction: traditional print media and publishing. Some of you may find this an obvious observation. You might think everyone already knows this, but what most investors fail to grasp is how complete and how fast this process is unfolding. For decades, we provided financing to newspaper companies, magazine publishers, and book editors. We know the business models, cost structures, revenue patterns, and customer bases of these institutions better than almost anyone else in the market. And what this accumulation of data tells me is abundantly clear. The traditional print media business model is mathematically unsustainable and has lost its capacity to survive economically. The numbers confirm this plainly. Newspaper circulations have declined by more than 50% over the last decade, and this decline is gaining momentum. Print advertising revenues have collapsed by more than 70% since 2000 and continue to shrink at double-digit rates. Magazine subscriptions have decreased by more than 40%, eroding faster every year. Even book sales, which appear relatively more resilient, are rapidly shifting to digital formats and moving toward print-on-demand models that eliminate dependence on traditional publishing infrastructure. But the real killer is not declining demand. The real killer is the fixed cost structure that has become mathematically impossible to sustain with falling revenues. Print media requires significant fixed costs: printing facilities, distribution networks, delivery systems, inventory management, returns processing. These costs were manageable when circulation and advertising revenues were strong, but as the the revenue base continues to collapse, sustaining them becomes impossible. When we examine the financial statements of large-scale print media companies, the model shows the same pattern: declining revenues, fixed costs that cannot be reduced fast enough, mounting debt loads, and cash flows insufficient to finance operations for much longer. The vast majority of these companies are technically already bankrupt. They are being kept alive only by debt restructuring and asset sales. The acceleration factor is artificial intelligence and digital content production. AI systems can now produce written content faster at lower cost, and in many cases with greater efficiency than human writers. News aggregation, content summarization, and personalized article creation processes are being automated. Why would advertisers continue to pay premium prices for print audiences that are constantly shrinking when they can reach broader, far more targeted audiences at lower costs through digital platforms? We no longer allocate new financing to traditional print media companies. With existing clients, we are working on either a full transition to digital models or merger and acquisition processes that capture the residual value in subscriber bases and brand names. But we are telling these companies very clearly and directly: the traditional print media business model is nearing its end, and the end is coming far faster than most people anticipate. The second sector entering the process of extinction: traditional physical retail, especially large-scale stores and shopping malls. Given the rise of e-commerce, this may also seem like an obvious choice, but what many people fail to grasp is how comprehensive this transformation is and how fast it is accelerating. The COVID pandemic did not initiate the end of physical retail. It only accelerated trends that were already inevitable. Consumer behavior has permanently shifted toward online shopping, not just for convenience, but for price comparison, product selection, and delivery options that physical stores generally cannot match. And once consumers have grown accustomed to making the majority of their purchases online, they rarely return to the limited selection and inefficiency of physical stores. We process both digital and physical retail payments and see the transaction flow data in real time. While online retail sales grow by 15 to 20% annually, physical store sales are declining by 5 to 10% annually, depending on the category. This is not a temporary blip. This is a permanent break in consumer spending behavior. The mathematical problem facing physical retail extends far beyond declining sales volumes. Physical retail requires large fixed costs: lease agreements, store fixtures, inventory, utilities, insurance, staff, maintenance. These costs were manageable when sales per square foot were strong and growing. But as sales density retreats and the majority of consumers increasingly move online, sustaining them becomes rapidly impossible. When we examine the financial statements of large chain retail companies, the numbers show something beyond catastrophic. Over the last 5 years, sales per square foot have been pulled down by 30 to 50%. Profit margins have disappeared entirely in many categories. Most retailers are now paying far more in rent and fixed costs than their gross profit. It is mathematically impossible for many physical retail formats to survive in this economic environment. The main factor accelerating this process is the maturation of e-commerce logistics and fulfillment networks. Amazon, Walmart, and other major retailers have built highly efficient distribution systems capable of delivering the majority of products within 24 to 48 hours at prices competitive with or more advantageous than physical stores. Same-day delivery is no longer an exception in major metropolitan areas. It is becoming a standard. The buy online pickup in store model is eliminating the last remaining operational advantage physical stores had over online retail. Shopping malls are particularly doomed because their business model depends on large anchor stores that generate traffic for smaller boutique retailers. When anchor stores collapse, the boutiques lose foot traffic and cannot sustain themselves in the market. Shopping mall owners are left with large-scale real estate with weakened cash generation capacity and extremely limited alternative uses, unable to cover operating and financing costs. For years at JP Morgan, we have been minimizing our commercial real estate exposure to retail properties. We are directing our clients to stay away from retail-focused real estate investment trusts and retail-heavy commercial real estate positions. With our existing retail clients, we are working to shift their business models toward online online sales, fulfillment, and direct-to-consumer strategies. But we are saying it very clearly. Traditional physical retail is no longer a long-term sustainable business model for many product categories. The third sector entering the process of extinction, traditional fossil fuel energy, specifically coal mining and coal-based electricity generation. This will probably be the most controversial sector, but the economic reality is this. Coal is losing its relevance as an energy source far faster than most people realize, and the financial implications for investors are enormously destructive. This transformation is not primarily driven by environmental regulations or political pressure. Although these factors are accelerating the process, the core reason is pure economics. Renewable energy sources such as wind and solar have become more cost competitive than coal for electricity generation in most markets, and the cost gap is widening every year. We provide project financing across all technology types in the energy spectrum and see the real project economics and capital allocation dynamics firsthand. Wind and solar projects are winning bids in most markets not because of subsidies or regulatory advantages, but because of lower cost per kilowatt hour compared to coal and natural gas. The mathematical problem with coal is this. The cost of renewables continues to decline, while coal's costs continue to move upward. Solar panel costs have retreated by more than 80% over the last decade and continue declining as production scales and technology advances. Wind turbine costs have decreased by more than 40% and continue to fall as turbine efficiency increases and installation processes become more standardized. Meanwhile, coal is fighting rapidly increasing cost pressure from environmental compliance requirements, transportation, storage, and the maintenance of aging plant infrastructure. Coal-fired power plants require enormous capital investment to meet emissions standards, and the payback periods for these investments in most cases far exceed the economic life of the facilities. The acceleration factor is the shift in corporate energy procurement strategies and grid modernization. Companies like Google, Amazon, Microsoft, and Apple are committing to 100% renewable energy for their operations, not because of political pressure, but because renewables provide the cost predictability and price stability that fossil fuels cannot offer. When your largest energy customers are demanding renewable sources, coal plants become stranded assets. Electric utilities are retiring coal plants ahead of schedule because building new renewable capacity is now more cost-effective than operating existing coal infrastructure. We see coal plant retirement announcements almost every month, and the process is accelerating as executives recognize that coal has lost its economic competitiveness. For years, we've been systematically reducing our credit and financing allocation to coal-focused projects and companies. With our existing coal sector clients, we are working on developing renewable energy projects, directing investment toward energy storage, and transitioning to alternative businesses where existing infrastructure and expertise can be leveraged. But we are stating it very clearly. Coal has no economically viable long-term future as an energy source. The fourth and final sector entering the process of extinction, traditional cable television and linear broadcasting. Given the rise of streaming platforms, this may seem like the most obvious choice. But what most investors are missing is how rapidly this business model is collapsing and how limited the number of viable options remaining for companies dependent on traditional television advertising and subscription revenue structures. The problem is not just the rapid cancellation of cable subscriptions. The problem goes far beyond that. Younger consumers are not just moving away from cable television. They are completely abandoning traditional television viewing habits. Instead, they are turning to social media, gaming, and on-demand digital content that do not conform to the linear broadcast model. We finance media companies across all formats and see real-time audience and revenue trends clearly. Traditional television viewership is contracting by 10 to 15% annually across all age segments, but among those under 35, this decline exceeds 20% annually. Even more critical, the total time people spend watching traditional television is declining even faster than the drop in viewer numbers. This erodes the value of television advertising, regardless of audience size. Cable subscription numbers are retreating rapidly. We are seeing annual losses in cable subscribers of 5 to 8%, and this decline is accelerating as streaming platforms expand their content libraries and improve user experiences. But the real problem for cable companies is not just subscriber loss. It is that the majority of those lost subscribers come from the young, high-income demographic segment that advertisers value most. Television advertising revenues are also following audience losses, but the effect is felt in a compounded manner because the quality of the target audience is declining. Advertisers are shifting their budgets from television to digital platforms not proportional but far more radically, because digital advertising provides targeting, real-time measurement, and a higher return on investment that television advertising can never offer. The acceleration factor is the streaming technology and content production infrastructure reaching a critical level of maturity. Netflix, Disney+, Amazon Prime, and other streaming platforms have clearly proven that on-demand, personalized content delivery is superior and more efficient than linear programming for most content types. They are also investing billions in original content that competes with, and in many cases surpasses, traditional television productions in quality. But perhaps more critical, social media platforms such as TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram have captured the attention of younger audiences through content types that cannot be adapted to the linear television format. These platforms offer the engagement, personalization, and social connection that linear television can never match. The business model problems of traditional television are unsolvable. Linear television requires enormous fixed costs for content production, broadcast infrastructure, and advertising sales operations. These costs were manageable when television commanded captive audiences and competition was limited, but as audiences fragment across hundreds of digital platforms and advertising money flows to more effective channels, sustaining these costs becomes impossible. For years, we have been systematically reducing our exposure to traditional media companies that derive the majority of their revenues from linear television. We are directing our clients to stay away from allocating capital to cable operators, traditional broadcast networks, and businesses dependent on television advertising. Now, let me explain why these four sectors are heading to zero simultaneously, and why the transformation is happening far faster than most investors expect. The common element is the simultaneous occurrence of technological disruption, shifting consumer behavior, and economic obsolescence. In each case, new technologies emerged offering consumers stronger value propositions while requiring lower cost structures on the provider side. This creates an inevitable death spiral for traditional business models: shrinking demand, a fixed cost base that cannot be reduced fast enough, and competitive disadvantages that grow increasingly severe over time. The acceleration factor is that artificial intelligence is making the transformation far faster and far more comprehensive than previous technological disruptions. AI is automating content production, making distribution networks more efficient, personalizing consumer experiences at the individual level, and pushing traditional business models to a more expensive and competitively weaker position, while lowering the cost structures of digital alternatives. But the most critical factor is the changes in consumer behavior that are permanent, not cyclical. Younger users are not temporarily trying digital alternatives. They are permanently adopting digital-first lifestyles, and this is rendering traditional business models irrelevant. And as this consumer base ages and their purchasing power increases, traditional business models are permanently losing their core customer base. If you hold investments in these four sectors, you need to understand that you are not facing cyclical headwinds or temporary disruptions. You are holding positions in sectors that are completely losing their existence, and the value of these assets will approach zero within the next 5 to 10 years. The smart money understood this long ago and has been reducing positions in these sectors for years. The question is, will you recognize this transformation in time and protect your capital, or will you continue holding these investments until the obsolescence is universally acknowledged and the value has already been destroyed? These sectors are not experiencing slow declines that will unfold over decades. They are being rapidly displaced by fundamentally superior technologies and business models. The transformation is happening now, and it is gaining momentum far faster than most investors realize. Ask your portfolio this question: does every asset you hold there represent a business model that will still exist 10 years from now? If the answer is not clear, clear that very uncertainty is already a warning sign. When you look at financial history, those who were able to protect their wealth during every major period of technological disruption shared a common trait. They recognized the transformation early and positioned themselves decisively. The majority of those who suffered the heaviest losses were too late due to their emotional attachment to the businesses they knew, the sectors they were accustomed to. Loyalty to an asset can never be a strategy. Remaining loyal on a sinking ship does not make you honorable, it makes you sink. Markets do not give early warnings. Institutional players exit quietly, while retail investors continue to hold on with hope, and by the time prices begin to reflect reality, it is too late to exit. This is what is happening in these four sectors. The choice is yours, but time is far shorter than you think.